right, welcome back to either the second or third episode of Delta Defiance, the anti-fascist book club of the airwaves. I say it that way because we could consider the first episode either a two-part, or we could consider the first two episodes of the podcast. But that was dealing with Clint Smith's book, How the Word is Passed. And it was just led to a great discussion. And I'm really glad we launched it with that. Today, we are going to be talking about Ursula K. Le Guin's novel, The Dispossessed. Ursula K. Le Guin was certainly one of the most significant and important 20th century American science fiction writers, and someone who incorporated a lot of different kind of philosophical, political kind of dynamics into her work, whether it was feminism, ecological understanding, Taoism, a lot of different currents. But one is definitely anarchism, and the way that anarchism is an inherently anti-fascist tradition, and I would say the antithesis of the hierarchical understanding that we have of fascism. So she was born in Berkeley, California. Her father was the anthropologist Alfred Kroeber, and the K in Ursula K. Le Guin stands for Kroeber. And her mother was Theodora Kroeber. Alfred was a real pioneer in the field of anthropology as an academic discipline. What he is probably best known for was his study of the Yahi tribe in California, and the last known individual of that tribe actually lived in the facilities of the anthropology department at Berkeley. Theodora actually wrote the book Ishi and Two Worlds, which is one of the real foundational monographs of the discipline of anthropology. Ursula Le Guin submitted her first story to Astounding Science Fiction at the age of 11.
Wow.
It was not published. She got an MA in French from Columbia University in 1952 and married Charles Le Guin in 1953. They moved to Portland in 1959, where they stayed for the rest of their lives, and she was very much associated with Portland. Very much
Portland, Oregon, I assume?
That is correct, yes. She was very much part of a very lively literary scene that continues to this day. Her first published novel was Rocannon's World, which was published as an ace double along with Avram Davidson's The Karchi Reign. She was very much associated with a new wave of science fiction writing in the 1960s that included authors like Philip K. Dick, Harlan Ellison, Thomas Disch, as well as British writers like Michael Moorcock and J.G. Ballard. The British publication New Worlds was very much associated with this movement, as were the Harlan Ellison edited anthologies Dangerous Visions. Le Guin was very known for incorporating elements of anthropology, ecological awareness, philosophical anarchism into her work. Among her inspirations as an anarchist thinker and writer were Emma Goldman, Peter Kropotkin, Paul Goodman, Murray Bookchin, Percy Shelley. She was known for a couple of different series of novels, the Earth-Sea Cycle, and the Hainish Cycle, which includes The Dispossessed. The Dispossessed was one of the last to be written in the Hainish Cycle, but comes first chronologically. She was also a National Book Award winner for The Farthest Shore in 1973 as a children's book. She was acknowledged by the literary world outside of just the genre of science fiction.
She deserved to be.
Oh, absolutely. But within science fiction, she won, just for her novels, she won 4 Nebula Awards, 2 Hugos, and 5 Locus Awards. And The Dispossessed was one of those that won all 3 of those. She was just a giant within the field of science fiction.
I think today her work would be seen in a larger context.
I think you're right. I think in more recent years, a good analogy to Ursula Le Guin would be Margaret Atwood.
Absolutely. 100%.
Someone who, without question, incorporates a lot of elements of speculative fiction into her work, but is considered, I would say, one of the front runners for the Nobel Prize in Literature at this point.
Yeah.
There are a couple of art exhibits coming up that are Le Guin inspired. The Oregon Contemporary is going to premiere an exhibit called A Larger Reality, and the Architecture Association in London is going to be putting on a show called The Word for World, The Maps of Ursula K. Le Guin, which I think is just acknowledging how she deals with other worlds and with other places so vividly.
The world building.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's a tremendous strength of hers.
J.R.R. Tolkien.
Who was definitely an inspiration for her. Ursula K. Le Guin died in 2018 at the age of 88 in her hometown of Portland. I just have a personal anecdote of a time when I briefly met Ursula Le Guin. We lived in Portland for several years, and I worked at Powell's Books, which is a very, very large and important independent bookstore in downtown Portland. She used to come in quite often. When I was working there, we organized a union through the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, Local 5, and it was a very contentious process. The owner of Powell's and the administration were not in favor of this, despite their very legit kind of liberal credentials when it came to LGBT issues, literacy, book bans, issues like that, always on the right side. But when it came to organizing a union, they were not so pleased. A lot of the writers, a lot of the authors in the area were very uneasy about taking a side because of the importance of Powell's to the literary community. Ursula Le Guin was one of those who was not hesitant. She was as true to her principles as I think she could be, and she was very vocal about that. And there was one time when I was cashiering and she came in, and I was just able to convey my appreciation to her that she was willing to take that principled stand.
That is a fabulous insight. That's great.
We'll see in this novel, I think, how it can't be taken for granted when someone takes a stand on principle.
That's right. Oh, absolutely. I think you're right, Tony. So this is Anti-Fascist Book Club podcast. I think it's worth some discussion. The fact that this early in this project, we are talking about a science fiction novel, which is not necessarily what one thinks of when one thinks of anti-fascist literature. It is a genre that we all have a passion for, we all have a history with, and that I feel like it's going to be something we are going to periodically turn to within this podcast. And I think it'd be interesting if we were to talk a little bit about our experience with science fiction, which often tends to be a kind of formative genre for young people when they are coming to their own kind of decisions about what they feel, what they believe. I certainly feel like that is true with my own experience. But what about y'all? What has been your experience with science fiction and how it's been a formative influence?
So when I was growing up, the Orson Scott Card Ender series was popular, and Ender's Game being the first in a trilogy of books. I found it really created a sense of wanting to be more aware of what authority is trying to extract from me as an individual within society, because Ender was taken advantage of for his talents and his patriotic sense of duty. I felt the same way. I felt like a child among thieves. That's a line from this novel, The Dispossessed. I see some similarities between me and the main character in this novel, Shevek. And I see another parallel between Shevek and Ender, the main character in the series that had such an impact on me as a youth. They're both, at times in the respective novels, instruments of empire. And so that's where, when I joined the Navy, I recognized that I can be a force for good, but I still have to maintain my individuality within a society. So I wonder how Jen was impacted.
Sci-fi has always been huge for me. Huge. And it's always, I think, been that, gateway. And I couldn't help but start thinking about Star Trek and just the power of world building. It really does enable you to kind of create this distance so that you can put a lens on things that are close to you, but see them with a gap or with a distance between, and so then you're able to more safely get outside of yourself and look at yourself, but through this lens, right? So that that gateway I feel is like huge. And so I really always think of Star Trek, because Star Trek it's almost like a realized utopia, if you will. It's after going through the growing pains. It's like this post-scarcity society. There was a podcast, and they were talking about Jean-Luc Picard. He was describing, what Earth was now, and what the Federation, when Starfleet was, and so forth. And he was saying, we don't need money now. We're past money. And this person was saying, well, why do you work? And he said, we work now for the betterment of humankind, right? And so this always was this like connection to me. What we're seeing with this story is before you got there, we're seeing the struggle. Yeah. We're seeing the idea realized in this place of scarcity, famine. But they're almost in this way forced to work together. Star Trek shows me a future where humanity has its act together, right? And the Dispossessed shows me that raw human struggle that it takes to get there and to keep it alive. So it's kind of the difference between the idea and the experiment, or the actualization of the experiment.
Now, I know that you are just a fan of Star Trek just across the series. Are there particular iterations, particular characters within there who have really spoken to you over the years? Has it evolved over the years as you have evolved watching these various iterations?
I'm sure. I mean, I think Janeway is one of my favorite captains, but I remember episodes, and this whole book reminded me of some particular episodes that were important to me. One of them, even from the original series, and that's the great thing, is that the original series, which was contemporary to when this book was written,
right?
The original series, there was an episode, and these people on this planet were like black on one side and white on the other, right? And then there was a different group of people that were black on one side and white on the other, but they were opposite. So they were like the mirror image of each other, right? So it was like this weirdness, but they hated each other. It was like they're the same thing, just like a reflection, and they cannot stand each other. They're at war. And there's one left, and for whatever reason, like he's been out in space, lost or whatever. They go back to his planet. I think there might be even two left, and they realized that their entire planet is destroyed and gone, and they're still fighting, right? And so that was like, wow. That was just like such big ideas, right? Yeah. So I mean that's the original series, and it's just kind of like pushing those boundaries. I know Ursula K was very, very big into, I can't remember what book it is, but there's an ungendered person, there's ungendered people, and Star Trek had to kind of like really play a fine line with some of this. But there was an episode where there was this planet that had nobody had a particular gender, and there were people that were on this planet that had a particular affinity for one or the other. So one of them actually falls for Riker, and he actually is falling for this person. And they find out that this is going on, and they reprogram. And this was all going on in the 90s, right? When there was a whole bunch of LGBT reprogramming organizations. So all of these things I'm talking about, this world building with Ursula K, showing us this distance between what we're able to deal with in our own society and see it far away. This is also going on our TV, and I think all of this has huge impact. Star Trek, I think, is an amazing way to push this. Science fiction in general is an amazing way to kind of push these ideas.
I, as a teenager, was particularly drawn to one writer within science fiction. That was Harlan Ellison. For one thing, he wrote for the original Star Trek. He wrote City on the Edge of Forever, the time travel episode where they go back to Chicago during the Depression, and it co-stars Joan Collins. And it's considered by many to be the peak of the original Star Trek. But Harlan Ellison was a writer who he was still very active at the time in the 80s when I was first starting to read him. So when I got through with one of his paperbacks, that cost all of like $2.50, maybe $2.95, I could go back to B. Dalton in the mall and
I thought you were buying dime store novels. I was giving you a hard time, Mike.
Oh, well, maybe I'm not quite as old as you think I am, Tony, but
I retract my statement.
Yeah, we go to the movies. There'd be somebody playing the piano.
Yeah.
To the
all's fair in love and baseball rivalry.
But Ellison, he wrote primarily short stories too. So he wasn't one of these Le Guin or Asimov, Frank Herbert, who would have these epic series that would go on for multiple novels of world building. He would be doing it in just a few pages. These days, I particularly remember a story called I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. And it goes back to the 70s, I bet. It is basically about a super intelligent AI decided that humanity is its enemy. And there are just a handful of people left. And it's just about the various ways that it chooses to torture them.
Wow.
And
I can see why it left a mark.
there are some pretty intelligent people saying some pretty alarming things about what AI could be capable of. And that's what I keep coming back to is I have no mouth and I must scream. And the other thing about Ellison is that he was a very committed activist. I would say like left liberal, civil rights, equal rights amendment was in the air at the time. And he was very supportive of that. And living around Shreveport, Louisiana at that time, there were just not that many voices available dissenting from a very conventional Reagan era Cold War conservative viewpoint of male dominated, Christian dominated, and to be able to go to the mall at any time and
Spend $3 for
right,
that point of view.
for that kind of subversion within this kind of deceptive kind of vessel of this genre story was very illuminating and very liberating.
Yeah, I understand. To me, The Dispossessed, it presents that like utopia with cracks, right? I mean, wasn't the subtitle the ambiguous utopia?
That's right.
You know, so it presents this flawed utopia. And I recently just watched Logan's Run, and Logan's Run essentially is a very interesting contrast because it's like a false utopia, right?
Right.
So you have this ambiguous utopia, then you have this false utopia with Logan's Run. Everything is like hedonistic, perfect. We have this wonderful life. On Urras, you're free, but there's this struggle. In Logan's Run, there's no struggle at all. But you are not free. You just think that you're free. You know, you're actually completely controlled. And then that, of course, then made me think about the Matrix, right? Agent Smith says, you know, we tried to make these worlds, build these worlds for the human beings who are, you know, now batteries. And we did. We created this perfect utopia and the human mind actually rejected it. Do you remember that one? The human mind actually rejected it. So he had to create this struggle, right? The machines had to create the struggle because the humans, they couldn't survive and thrive in a place that was like in a complete utopia. So the interesting then connection, I think, is that Anarres, right? The Odonians leave Urras because of their revolution. They go to Anarres, which is a stark, you know, struggling place. It's dry, it's arid. And you know, maybe they had to go there. They had to have some of that struggle in order for their society, their big experiment and idea to be able to exist, right?
I think you're right that there's a requirement for anarchist movement to get a society off the ground, that there be struggle, and that because of human nature wanting to strive, if you're not put into a situation of lack where you're dependent upon one another to strive for a common goal, there just is so much incentivized behavior to benefit at the expense of another.
100%. Yeah. And I think that's like one of the big messages in this book, this idea that she's had. It really can't exist now. I mean, we're past that point. But we couldn't turn this world. There is no true future Star Trek for us. I don't think that we're ever going to get to that place. Maybe. I mean, what happened in Star Trek was they had a complete decimation. It was like the Third World War. You have to go back to scratch to kind of rebuild from nothing. Where we are now, we can't convert into something like that. But I think what she was trying to say is that you can have pockets of the ideas, right? Because even on Urras, where you know, even before you can say hello to somebody, you know who's got more power in the relationship. That was one of the things Shevek was dealing with, was like figuring out, you know, just the way someone speaks to you or the way they address you, they're putting themselves in a lower or higher place to you. But even there, he was able to find a nugget of those working people that were unionizing and trying to live the ideal that he was actually trying to live with their own flawed interpretation and, without any doubt, the Adonianism that was in those working class people was, a higher ideal than what they were actually living, right? Because it was like the expression of that idea.
I think the Thuvians had the command and control without the individual expression of making free choices with free will. I think the Odonians, they were able to freely express revolutionary spirit early on, but then once it became codified with organization and bureaucratic structure, I think it took Shevek to leave and return and with that new perspective, see that revolutionary movements require individuals to have a ongoing struggle with the revolutionary spirit for that society to evolve. Otherwise, it becomes controlled and bureaucratic as a capitalistic society.
Just with different social order control, like the community control, which there's some of that here. But again, you do have those hierarchies, in Urras. But yes, that you have to conform, right?
Yeah.
On Anarres, or else you get those terrible work positions.
Yeah, I wouldn't, mind doing my duty on occasion, but I think we're quite accustomed to comfort in our society. So it would be quite a drastic change in our quality of life, I think.
So I feel like we should kind of back up and provide kind of a broad synopsis to the novel. We've kind of jumped into some of these concepts, which is very easy to do with a novel that is so good at its world building and so good at incorporating these things. I feel like we should talk a little bit about just the plot and the characters who we're dealing with here. So the action of the novel, The Dispossessed, takes place on two different worlds, and the structure of the novel is such that the chapters go back and forth between those two worlds. The two worlds are Anarres and Urras. Earth is within this larger narrative as well. Earth is known as Terra. They have diplomatic relations, although the technology has evolved to a point where there is interstellar travel, but it's very lengthy, as is any kind of communication between worlds. So basically, there are a few worlds that have human habitation with limited communication between them.
I got the impression that they could travel at near to light speed, but these planets were many light years away. So even at near to light speed, you could be talking about months or years for communication to actually happen.
Anarres is a moon of Urras, and it's basically like an arid desert planet, which also leads to some potentially interesting discussion just about the iconic desert planets in science fiction. I think it was particularly of Arrakis / Dune and Tatooine within the Dune and Star Wars worlds. The idea is that these anarcho-syndicalist Adonian revolutionaries at some point were basically just stirring up so much trouble, revolting, that the idea was that they could have their own planet that is challenging, to say to the least, for human habitation, but they would be able to implement the social structures that they wanted to without interference.
Yeah, if you don't like it here, just leave.
The Dispossessed takes place well after that original migration.
A couple hundred years, maybe.
And the main character is a physicist named Shevek. He is studying the structure of time and is making some discoveries that have some revolutionary applications. As a principled scientist, he would like very much to be able to exchange these ideas with other scientists. And so he is taking the step to travel to Anarres to do this. Now, this is just unprecedented, and there's evidently a lot of passionate and potentially even violent opposition to this on his home planet.
He's a traitor.
Right. It's the wounds still seem to be very fresh from the breakup that happened
But it's not
centuries ago.
everybody. I mean, there's definitely a contingent that thinks that he's a traitor. There's a contingent that's worried that what are the implications of this? And then there's a contingent that says this is completely Adonian. Nobody can tell you what to do. If you want to leave, you can definitely leave. And then they're like, but you can't come back. And they're like, well, of course you can come back. You're still Adonian. So, I mean, there's the whole spectrum, but there's definitely this dissent in that community. And they're feeling that community pressure. And then sometimes they're saying, maybe we need to make our own Anarres within Anarres. So they're feeling like that. But I think that would be the wrong idea then, because then you're just creating these states, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, he does go because that's really Adonian.
And Odo, the founder of Odonianism and the movement to create a new society, a new civilization on the world of Anarres, she reminds me of Marcus Garvey and his development of the UNIA, the United Negro Improvement Association. And I imagine if Marcus Garvey had been successful and not undermined by United States tax law or whatnot, he, would have also known that the survival of this new civilization would demand you have some loyalty, some buy-in for, given amount of time. If everybody, abandons it when times get tough, then you're, left without a society that can go on. And so if you had an entirely new planet, it reminds me of the way the novel begins. There's a wall. The Odonians have created this wall that separates the landing ships from Urras that, provide for trade between the worlds. That wall is telling their sister planet, that you're not welcome here because we have made it on our own this long. We're not about to go back home, like the prodigal son. They're not going back home. They have established a world that expresses their values, and they don't want it corrupted by the values of Urras. Mm-hmm. So now that I think about the choice that Shevek made, he's seeking a different kind of independence. He realizes that there's been walls built up within him. He's not truly living a revolutionary life anymore. He's playing the game for his boss at work. He's playing the game with these different work assignments. And so he recognizes that if he's to pursue this lifelong mission, like his purpose is to develop this theory of synchronicity.
Instantaneous communication. I can't remember what they call it.
Yes. This would... Simultaneity. Which would truly, be revolutionary for not just communication, but presumably for interstellar travel. And that sets up the tension later on when he does visit Urras, because that theory is what could be commodified, and why he's not truly free until he recognizes that his theory is only going to benefit society if it's not permitted to be released into the wrong hands.
Which is, of course, I mean, that's the discourse that surrounds a lot of the discussion of artificial intelligence right now. Ursula Guin based the character of Shevek on a family friend, Robert Oppenheimer.
Really?
Yes.
Shevek was based on Robert Oppenheimer?
Yes.
Astounding.
Oppenheimer was more of a connector than someone who came up with brilliant theories on his own, but also someone who ended up being very ambiguous about the results of his work, which would obviously had this noble anti-fascist motivation at its core, but the long-term implications have been much more morally nebulous.
It makes perfect sense, right? Shevek is just a theoretical physicist, but his ideas can easily, by the people who have the technology, be created into something applicable. And so they talk about that ability to have instantaneous communication. I think the larger goal is that they could essentially have wormholes to get to a different location immediately. Urras wants this because they want to actually warlike conquer their enemies. So then Shevek
Chilling.
finds this out and figures out what they really want this for, and why they're like putting him up in this flashy pad, kind of keeping him away from all of the things that don't look pretty. He figures that out, that he's been bought. But the interesting thing, to your point about Oppenheimer, you have this situation where you either have the stifling of the message because of the bureaucracy, so you can't get the message out that way, or you have somebody who's going to try to own it for warlike purposes. Now, you have this third situation happening where if you want to keep your job, you have to speak it this way. You can't publish on this. Everything you say has to be vetted. If it doesn't meet the governmental ideal, then it's stifled. And what do? You're in that same decisioning. So we're still living this. I mean, it's extremely relevant. What Shevek's decision was, Oppenheimer's decision, and the decisions that we're facing today, all around scientific, something that should be like for everyone. Something, and that's why Shevek gives it away. He gives it to that nugget of ideal Odonians that are on Urras. He thinks that they actually will do the right thing and provide it equally so that everyone has it and nobody can take advantage of it.
Open source.
Open source.
So when we talk about Anarres, we're talking about the moon, we're talking about a planetary body,
Yeah.
but we're also talking about a relatively unified social, political place. When we talk about Urras, we're talking about a planet that is basically structured, the time it was written, a Cold War, bipolar world in which there are two dominant superpowers. One is basically familiar to us as the United States at the time. Certainly not a dystopia.
No.
But there's a lot of inequality. Women are definitely second-class citizens in any kind of decision-making political process. They're presented as the
Trad wife.
yes.
But with a decidedly voyeuristic sense of public display of their bodies, which I found really
Ferenges.
interesting.
Do y'all know about the Ferenges? Women weren't supposed to actually wear any clothes.
Okay. All right.
Star Trek.
Right. And it's evidently the style for women to have shaved heads, and then to adorn themselves with jewels that they can even have magnets implanted in order to have these seemingly like freestanding jewels.
They sound beautiful.
Indeed.
And it was funny when somebody finally asks him, what is it? What are the women like on Anarres? And he's like, oh, nothing like you. They're all hairy everywhere.
And that's from a man in a committed relationship with
Yeah.
Tech But I found it interesting. His first night spent on Urras, he noticed that from the feel of the bedding, every item of furniture he touched, it felt sexual to him.
Right.
He felt that the culture was designed to sexualize everything, even inanimate objects. And I think that is familiar to our society, that we had put the fabric softener in our laundry to give it that silky feel. So I think there's something about we're accustomed to a soft life, and on Anarres, Shevek had become accustomed to a very rough life. The contrast presents all sorts of sensory overload, which is not diminishing in our society. It just continues to fill us with new stimuli and trying to create consumer-driven personality so that we can no longer think for ourselves. And
That's the friendly fascism.
exactly, when it comes time, fascism doesn't care whether we've been enablers or been defiant. It is going to put us, in the dirt regardless.
That whole idea of friendly fascism is placating you with all of the nice things. You have a place to lay your head. You have some kind of entertainment. You go out and get the nice meal occasionally. You're not like this constant struggle. Shevek, coming from that struggle, right? He gets wrapped into this. He doesn't actually work for a while. And then they're like, where's this thing? And he's like, what am I supposed to do? This is the first time I actually had all of this yaya put in front of me. But he kind of like buys into it for a while until he's essentially gets drunk, right? And then
Right.
puts himself in a compromising position and acts not in the best way, I think, and then wakes up with a terrible hangover, shame, and I think that's when he actually like sees for the first time, and that's when things change.
I think one of Le Guin's strengths is that she doesn't present that contrast in a way that idealizes the approach that Urras has taken. You could argue that it's a purely utilitarian approach. Whether it's the softness of the beds or the aesthetics of life. There's a point where they're talking about Shevek's partner. She makes these mobiles. I get the idea that she does it kind of hesitantly because there's this sense that maybe that's just too individualistic for the society that they live in.
She's proud of them, and so that's too egoist.
Right. She calls it, the title of it is Occupation of Uninhabited Space. It's an acknowledgement of the ambiguity that she feels about it, that she gives it this completely utilitarian kind of title, even though it's something that is bringing very ambiguous and non-utilitarian just into their consciousness.
Maybe she protests too much.
That makes it a revolutionary act, in fact, that she's inhabiting that space.
Right.
With something of beauty.
But at the same time, I heard you saying maybe feeling a little, maybe not shame, but maybe just kind of like, oh, like, let me not be such an egoist about it.
Right. It's certainly at least self-consciousness
Yes.
about it. So then the other primary nation that we talk about on Urras is Thu, which, again, given the time that she was writing, seems to be basically based on the Soviet Union, a nation that thinks of itself as embodying the workers' paradise, a very controlled situation. We are learning about it through the scientist encountered by Shevek.
He's the one who tells him, he's like, you've been bought.
Sheffoilisk?
Yeah, that's him.
He is a functionary. I mean, he's very upfront that he would not be in the position to be serving as representative to another country if he wasn't reporting back everything he heard, and if he did not have an agenda. But he is
But he kind of
very
has to
instrumental.
explain that, right? I mean, because Shevek is so culturally unaware. He has to kind of explain that. He's like, of course I am.
And Thu, I would think, would think of itself in competition with Anarres as far as each of them feeling they are the legitimate expression of these non-hierarchical ideals of political structure and organization. They would see themselves as rivals, but also potentially as rivals of
AIO, maybe?
AIO?
AIO.
AIO, that's right.
AIO. Interesting name choices. I mean, Ursula with the name Ursula has given us some really hard names.
Yes. And I mean, while I think she's incredible at the world building, ideas saturating the economics and the politics, there are definitely times where I was sometimes confused about the people and the places. I felt like maybe they weren't as vividly drawn as individuals as other writers can be.
I didn't think about that. I found myself seeing these as archetypes, but when you brought up Thu seeing themselves as rivals with Anarres, I think that brings up her tendency to introduce tension between complementary and contradictory forces. So when you have opposing expression of Odo's teachings, that's the founder of Odonianism, that presents a natural rivalry. However, through the inhabitants of Thu, they recognize their true opponent was AIO. Those who dominated the politics on their own planet of Urras. And that's why they sent Sheffoilisk, an agent, to recruit Shevek to give his inspiration and the means of becoming more like Anarres. he rejects that. He recognized something distasteful in Sheffoilisk. It represented something like the control that his boss back on Anarres represented for him, but he wasn't as Jen mentioned, he wasn't as culturally aware of the way that the overwhelming love bombing that was coming from AIO was actually another means of control.
Yes.
And so it was Sheffoilisk's job to warn him that Pei, I think, was becoming, his best friend, among the scientists he met in AIO. And, Pei was just as much an agent for his nation as Sheffoilisk was for his. So it was important that he was able to listen to the various stakeholders on Urras. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gotten a full picture.
No, it was a big gift, I think, that, he got just getting that information, because I think that woke him up a little bit. Finally,
Yes.
and then he's gone, right? That guy is dispossessed, if you will. He's disappeared. He's no longer available, so it didn't work out well for him. But
he would find his way to Joking Lane, and that kind of sets in motion denouement, I guess, of his time on Urras, where he finds the underworld, on the planet, and the people who were truly dispossessed, from birth to death. They were there to make this, veneer of perfection
work
possible and make that society work.
Well, we talked about in the how the words are passed, Monticello, right? How did the veneer of Monticello work? How did Jefferson be able to have all of the time to do all of the writings and so forth? It was on the back of enslaved people, so it ties all together.
Absolutely.
But the one question I had, so he gets drunk, he goes to this town because he's like flipping, and he's got to get out of where he is because he's starting to have some realizations. I don't know if he subconsciously went to the place where the woman was, or I don't think he consciously did, but maybe there was something in his subconscious that ends up taking him to the place where his friend's sister lives, right? And then he remembers, oh, there is somebody here that I know, consciously, subconsciously, whatever. Brings her a gift. She's like shown interest in him, the first person who's actually shown interest in like where he comes from, and he's sexually attracted to her. And then she gets him drunk, and then he makes moves and does not really want to listen to no, right? Which was uncomfortable.
Very.
And then finally she's like, get off, no. And then people come over and kind of whisk him away back to where he's supposed to be. He wakes up and he feels like she's betrayed him. What did y'all, personally, I think everybody's, he's a grown ass man and he knows he hasn't had drinks before and he's starting to do this drinking. It's not her responsibility to make sure he doesn't get drunk. She doesn't know him. She doesn't know like all of the intricate details of like that they don't drink. She's just dealing with him like he's a man and he should be able to handle his liquor or whatever. Right. And then he does the thing, but he's the one who comes out and says in the book, at some point later, he felt that she had betrayed him. So I didn't know what y'all thought about that, because I was like, check yourself.
No, I think you're completely right. I think another interesting aspect about her is that she's a very articulate mouthpiece for her society and her place in it.
Yes.
The way that she hears Shevek describe the conditions in the society that he lives in, and the conditions that women are sharing equally in a way that is not the case on AIO. For Shevek, everything is just overwhelming him at this point. He obviously does behave in dishonorable ways. It's part and parcel, it seems like, of this situation overwhelming him.
I see Shevek in that moment as an Amish teenager on Rumspringa.
I'm hearing you.
I think that
I wasn't too hard on him.
I think that the sister of his friend was very aware. I don't know if the book is explicit about whether she's an agent as well and attempting to ply him with alcohol and her feminine wiles. However, I think because, as Mike mentioned, she's a very good speaker on the values of her society and where she feels empowered in her role in that society. I think she is, to the degree that she took certain actions which she expected to have a certain effect on this man, she is culpable for those actions.
Yes.
And
she was agreeing
she's
to be
not
with them, just not
culpable
then.
for their social norms, which involves exposure of her body.
Right.
Those are simple social norms that were developed over, the existence of their culture. That's not hers to bear. It is Shevek's. Absolutely. Everything else is Shevek's to bear. He acted very inappropriately and like he was entitled to something she's not yours. So
He acted very proprietarian.
he absolutely
did.
did. Well said.
Yeah.
Should we speak to gender roles and sexuality within the novel, and in relation to that, the experience of childhood and child rearing? All of those concepts are explored deeply in both of these societies by Le Guin, and I think in some very interesting ways, particularly for the time that she was writing within a genre that was still very male dominated.
I mean, y'all can listen to my 2 cents, given that I don't have children, but then y'all weigh in. I think that what stood out to me was early in the novel, Shevek is, just starting school. He is sitting in his classroom in the sunlight, and his teacher says, "Are you going to share that sunlight?" And Shevek doesn't want to share the sunlight. It's my sunlight. And the teacher physically lifts him out of the way and puts this other child in the sunlight. I thought that was insane, but that is the culture he grew up in. You are being egoistic by hogging the sunlight. I thought that was insane. First come, first serve. I sat in the sunlight. When I'm done with the sunlight, or when the sunlight moves, then the kid can get the sunlight. So here I respect that world, and it sounds like one of these utopias that I'd like to give a whirl, but that seemed insane to me. All right, I'll be quiet and listen now.
Way too far. No, I agree with you. I mean, I think that's when they've gone way too far, right? I mean, that's ridiculous, And why is this guy think he's so special that he has to make sure that this other kid, I mean, are you being asked to move? Are you sitting in the seat that the pregnant lady should be sitting in? You know what I'm saying? Yes, stand up for the damn pregnant lady. It's just a nice thing to do. You've had your butt in a seat for a while, and she's standing there. Be realistic about things. One of the major notes that I took about this was that Le Guin, she spends so much time and energy on it because she's using this gender and family issues to show us that society's structure does reach into the most very intimate parts of our lives and our politics, right? Gender equality on Anarres is not just an ideal, it's actually a prerequisite for their society. Everybody has to have that being very equal in jobs, in sexuality, no marriage laws, all of that is very important. And on Urras, we do see that hyper hierarchical model where women are treated as that decorative property, excluded from any type of science and power, which makes me think it's the sister or whatever. Maybe she's not an agent because I'm not sure they'd actually give her power enough to be an agent. But, women, even in those structures, and we saw that in Game of Thrones, even if they have no power, they're able to, kind of make their own power. And I think that was the thing about Game of Thrones was the story, to me, that story was truly about how women who have no power are able to take power. That's what I took away, even between all the sex and the killing. So many women in that story with no power took power. So anyway, it was interesting. That idea that Le Guin is really being very, very, very honest with us, I think, is that she shows that equal society does come at personal cost. There is no such thing as free lunch. So we can achieve more equality. Maybe we can't achieve what they've achieved on Anarres, but we can achieve more equality even in this hierarchical structure. It does come with cost. And the cost I think she was trying to point out is that it comes maybe at a cost to the the family dynamic, them not being able to stay and raise their kid outside of a dormitory for very long, and it's looked down upon, them not able to actually have job placements in the same place, there is a cost to a family structure that he was, in some way envious of on Urras.
Yeah, I think when Shevek is spending time with a family, that really does seem to be the most relaxed that he's able to be. He's meeting the family's pet otter, and he's appreciating the candidness of the children who, like kids tend to do, if they're curious about something, they're just going to ask it. They're not going to think about the social appropriateness of the question. It does seem like Shevek thinks it humanizes the scientists who he's known in these more administrative kind of relationships, that seeing them with their families in their own homes humanizes them in a way that these previous interactions have not. And Shevek is there are points where you can tell that he has suffered by not knowing his mother as well as he would like, because of whether it was her choice or it was just the social pressure of the idea that the children would be more attuned to their community if they were living in this kind of communal experience from the beginning. That seems to be the idealistic view of the dormitory living for children, outside of the trade-offs that you were talking about, Jen, which are obvious.
And she was a true believer in that Anarres is for Odonians, and we cannot have any crossing of cultures, because she did very well in that society. She was successful as a scientist. Shevek's father, a less successful engineer or whatnot, was given more of a maternal role and in caregiving. And it was, I think, fascinating that Shevek's mother became a political rival later on when he was building an organization that would allow for more interaction with Urras, at least for scientific exchange. He was now finally coming into his own and said, I'm going to stand for what's right. And I think that then comes back full circle about how difficult it is to stand for what's right. And Shevek goes through his character arc to the point where he was even able to usher in another character to choose to join the Odonians on Anarres. Yeah. So I think we see his character arc then pass the torch to others, because the revolution can't be so limited to one population of people. If it doesn't spread, then it dies, because, the nature of ideas is to spread and to grow. So
you remind me of this quote, Tony. There's a particular quote that he says, you don't go anywhere unless you actually come home. And to your point, the guy's from Terrace,
right,
and he's on the ship, because what ends up happening is Shevek has to leave. He's given his theory away for free. Now he has to get off of the planet, because now he's an enemy of
he's
AIO.
Embroiled in a revolt.
Right. So he can't go back there, can't go to Thu, and he's given away his thing to the Odonian group that he found. So now he goes to the Terran embassy and essentially gets asylum, and then they end up taking him back home, and the guy on the ship decides to go home with him. But the very good thing, and the whole point about this journey, is that he has with full intention to go there and with nothing, to show up with nothing and live the life and give and get. But he also has full intention to go back home. So yes, I totally see exactly, because he needs to actually see what it is so that he can make that, 360 degree and bring it back. Because if he just came and stayed on Anarres, then there is no lift, there's no gain from him actually going. He's just become one without actually trying to take the ideas back. So yeah, that was a very hopeful ending.
Yeah, and it also strikes the Joseph Campbell hero's journey chords, and Campbell was heavily influenced by Carl Jung, and Ursula K has often acknowledged her debt to Jung as well. Also building on that, thinking of the Dispossessed within the tradition of utopian literature, and I would argue that The Dispossessed is pretty unique. The utopian novel often includes a journey of some sort, but it more typically involves an outsider coming into the utopian society and then being educated on the aspects of it. I mean, examples being H.G. Wells' A Modern Utopia, Sir Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, Lost Horizon, something similar in Ernest Callenbach's Ecotopia. Another common trope is for the utopian society to be visited in dreams, and Shevek's dreams are significant at different times. But there's the contrast in that Shevek is leaving the utopian society, going to this more fallen world, and through his experience of that, we're also getting the details of the utopia that he has left. In its structure, it's hewing to some of the utopian tropes, but otherwise turning some others upside down.
The interesting thing to me is that a utopia for some is not a utopia for others, right? And I think that's like where we're sit today so much, bringing this like back to today, is that we can look and we understand that the way that this is written, Anarres is the utopial ideal, right? That's the utopia. And Urras is the idea that they left, they couldn't live there anymore, that was not their utopia. I think that there are definitely people who would look at the other way around and say that, Anarres would be their utopia, that they'd be fine with Logan's Run, right?
Yeah.
As long as it works for me. I mean, and that's actually related to the book that Ursula Le Guin herself writes, right? She writes the book, and maybe we'll have an opportunity to talk about this one. The Ones Who Left, I'm going to mess up the name. I can't remember the name. Anyway, there's a child in a closet, and people are allowed to have this utopian lifestyle because they know that there's this child in the closet who's living this like terrible existence, right? There's a Star Trek show about this, y'all, I think. I'm almost positive it's Star Trek. I can't remember now. There's a sci-fi show about this. There's one particular individual that takes on all of the horror and the energy of the town is actually like pulled from the life essence of this child. And in order for them to have this good utopian lifestyle, they know, and there are those who in the knowing can't bear and leave, and so the book is, the ones who leave.
Yeah, I think one of the other problematic things about Logan's Run is that in the future, there's going to be a return to those 70s hairstyles and just all the work that it takes. I mean, if that's going to be automated,
I think Farrah Fawcett was in that.
Yeah. So
the feather is there. No doubt about it.
The Afro pick could come back.
Yeah.
Afrofuturist pick.
Absolutely. And we've already got the sculpture here in New Orleans. So I'm very proud of that Afro pick sculpture.
That's right.
What is that, Jackson Square?
So do we need to, I think we probably do need to finish up soon, but did we have any like closing thoughts? Or
I think it is a novel that is certainly relevant to our time, if not more relevant than it was to its own time. And
absolutely.
With science fiction or just with literature or art in general, to be able to say that certainly says something about the aesthetic power of the work. Maybe to an unfortunate degree, it also says something about the nature of our times.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, I think some people might get put off by science fiction. The only thing that really makes this book science fiction is that they're not human, right? Even though they're humans, they're not Earth humans. Number one. Number two, there is a spaceship that takes them. But I mean, we have spaceships here. They just don't go to the moon that often. But we have had them go to the moon before. Right. So that's not very science fiction. That's more science reality. And then there are scientific things that happen. So, I mean, if there's people who get put off by science fiction, I would say don't worry. This is actually literary fiction and very good literary fiction.
And if you have never read an Ursula K. Le Guin novel, this was my first. So this is a great one to jump in. The water's fine.
All right. Thank you all.
All right. Bye.
Bye.